Welcome to another episode of Amp Up Solar Workshop. Today we're going hands-on with quarter 20 all thread. It's one of those simple pieces of hardware that can make installs cleaner and sometimes even easier. It's kind of like duct tape for mounting, and when you really know how to use it, it can become a bit like a Swiss Army knife on the job. We've got off-grid Kenny back here to walk us through practical techniques and real world problem solving in the field. So if you've got questions, be sure and drop them in the chat. And also, if you've got ways of using these, share ways that you've used all thread to help solve problems on your own projects. Kenny, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
So yeah, today we get to talk about some of my most favorite things out in the field. So one of which being that this is all thread, otherwise known as threaded rod.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about what exactly is quarter 20 all thread.
So it's 1/4 inch diameter, and then for every inch, it's 20 threads.
Okay.
So hence the 1/4 inch by 20 threads per inch.
And are there different sizes?
There are. Typically, I like to use the 1/4 inch because a lot of mounting systems and PV modules will use 1/4 inch hardware. And so it's good to have this around. And so, yeah, it can come in really handy at times, for sure.
All right. Are there different types of quarter 20 all thread, like different materials that they're made from?
Yeah, typically they're going to be zinc or just metal, but various types. But I typically like to have the stainless. That way it's corrosion free, and anything that I have kind of in my first aid kits, as it were, on the job sites, I like to have it to where it can be used outdoors, because typically you can use outdoor equipment indoors, but indoor equipment using outdoor, that's when you have corrosion problems. So I like to use the stainless version of all thread.
Right. So this looks just like a bolt without the end on it or a tip on it, right? So it's just a threaded rod. Why are you choosing quarter 20?
Well, 1/4 20 gives us around, even with bending it, it gives us somewhere in the neighborhood of 800 to 1,000 pounds worth of holding power. And then when we bend it, yeah, it's super strong for as small as it is. And I don't know if you've been to a big box lately and looked up in the ceiling, you might see the air conditioning units and the ducting being suspended from probably not 1/4 inch all thread, but like probably 3/8 inch all thread from the ceilings. And that's some tonnage that's up there in the air.
So a big box like Home Depot or Walmart or something.
Absolutely,
they're using the same stuff, but maybe a little bit thicker.
Yeah.
To suspend air conditioners?
Yeah. So
wow.
Tonnage above your head. So yeah. So the next time you go to a big box store, like look up and you'll appreciate some all thread. Also, you might see this embedded in concrete as an anchor. You might go by like a like a 3-way stop sign or something like this, or stoplights. And you'll see a big pole that has the lights on it. But if you look at the bottom, there might be a flanged out piece of metal that goes over, a series of all thread that's been embedded into the concrete, to where they just take that flange rather than digging a deep hole to have support. They'll have a flanged out base that is then mounted to all thread that is anchored into the concrete. You might use something like this where you embed that in the concrete and have a kick to it, or even another plate to keep it from coming up. And then you pour the concrete over this with, obviously cover that part, and then you can then mount your flange base on the bottom of it. So
I've seen these with our Chico carport mounts, as they mounted them in our parking lot, where they had the bolts sticking out of the concrete bases that they poured, and then they had the metal pieces that they bolted onto the concrete so that they can then mount the poles that would hold the solar panels.
Absolutely.
Actually.
Yeah. So it's pretty good stuff. And yeah, so we're going to talk about that. And also we get to play with some of my other fun toys I like playing with, which is Unistrut, and the various ways that we can use all thread and Unistrut together for mounting, electrical equipment. So
very nice. So when you're grabbing Unistrut, what else are you needing to go with that?
So typically there's a few different things, such as we have our selection of nuts that will slide and or even pop into the strut itself. And what this is going to allow us to do is to put that where we want it and then twist it into place. It locks in. Then you would take your bolt, go through the mounting hole of, say, electrical or some sort of switch gear, and you can now mount that by tightening this against here, and it stays flush. So other than the Unistrut itself, there's also, like, this is the lower profile, the shallow strut is what they call this. And then they have the deeper strut, which is a little bit bigger for maybe heavier items and stuff. So there's the cone nuts. This is also what they call a cone nut as well, but this is more of a square cone nut. And you can also do that the same way. You pop this in where you need it and then twist it into place where it locks, rather than feeding them all through, which you can definitely do the slide and glide, or the pop and drop, as it were. Some other things also too, there are pipe straps that you can use with this. And they're similar in the way that they can kind of pop in as well. So you would take that in here, twist that in, and you put your conduit in through here, and you would tighten that up, and then you have a nice, good, firm way to mount your conduit as well.
So this has reminded me of something that I used to play with as a kid, Unistrut and all thread, kind of like an erector set.
Yeah, so this is like the erector set for grown-ups, or people who are not necessarily grown up, but that we look grown up.
And it looks like there's all kinds of accessories that can go with Unistrut to help you mount just about anything.
Absolutely. There's also L brackets, there's angled brackets, so you can make trapezoids to triangular pieces to, and make a rack like this. So yeah, there's plenty of accessories that go with Unistrut.
But we're going to talk about some simple ways to use this today. So talk to me about how is all thread generally, what are the general uses that people typically use all thread?
I would say for, suspending things from the ceiling, like we talked about earlier.
Okay.
And then concrete anchors is one of the more common ways. Now, also, how we're going to use it today.
Yeah, you're going to show us some ways that people don't typically use it.
Although
you've found ways that are very versatile.
Yes, we've found some ways that are very versatile. And I say we, other tradesperson, welders, carpenters, and electricians will sometimes use this all thread in a situation where you don't want to or can't penetrate, say, big purlin or some sort of structure where you just didn't want to make a penetration, so as to not, compromise the strength of that. You could take two pieces of Unistrut like this, run your all thread through here, and sandwich this on both sides, maybe a couple times depending on what you're mounting. That way it just compresses around your tube or what you're mounting to, and mount your equipment that way. And how we're going to be using this today is we've actually fashioned our own U-bolts out of this, because sometimes U-bolts aren't always available where you need them. You can also bend all threads in a square, more like a staple shape, or a U-bolt. And sometimes you might even run into like an octagonal looking thing to where you can actually bend that around and still be able to make a non-penetration into whatever that surface is, but still have some pretty amazing holding power when you combine this with the Unistrut.
So you're not worried about the structural integrity of your all thread when you bend it?
So there is, as it's straight, I believe it's around 1,000 pounds, maybe even more. So every time that if you do a tight bend, I think it decreases the strength of that by 50%. But a gentle bend like a U shape is somewhere like 15% maybe loss of. So it's still pretty stout stuff.
So we're talking still one of these will still hold about 600 pounds. And if you're using two, you're doubling that. So this one bar would hold about 1,200 pounds.
And that is with a safety factor of 3 to 5 too. So it really holds more than that. So I would say minimum of, you know, probably 600 pounds for a gentle bend of your all thread.
Okay.
So yeah, so pretty stout stuff. And of course, the larger it gets, it might be is harder to bend, but nonetheless, it's definitely adequate enough to hold, you know, an inverter, any sort of switch gear, or like this meter can and that sort of thing.
So you find that quarter 20 meets pretty much all of your needs.
As far as like a, you know, residential and maybe small commercial jobs, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so show us what we're going to do today.
So what we're going to do today is, first we'll put our gloves on.
All right. Well, let me do that along with you in case I need to help you at all.
So we're going to bend a piece of all thread to form a U-bolt that we've already fashioned here, but we're going to go ahead and mount that other piece of Unistrut. So we're going to go ahead and bend the all thread, and then we're going to cut it safely with a bench vise, or if you're out in the field, we'll also have a couple ways we can show you how to do that as well.
You got your glasses.
So safety first. On the glasses.
So now, when would you be using a pedestal mount like this as you're bending this?
So outdoors, sometimes you might be, you know, if you're mainly a roof installer, you might not ever need to use anything like this. But let's say you are mostly a roof install PV guy.
You made that look easy, Kenny.
And it's fairly easy. I've actually seen Kelly do it too. So don't think that it's something that, although Kelly is, you know, she's a pretty tough lady. So, but yeah. So you might not want to, so you might not be used to mounting equipment that's off the roof. So you might get a job where you have a pole mount or a ground mount, and this would be a great way to not compromise the structural integrity of your mounting system, but still be able to mount switch gear between the poles or on the pole. And a lot of times when I first started using all thread, I did a top of pole mount, and we're using Schedule 80 pipe, which is really thick walled stuff. We're in the middle of nowhere. And like, I decided, okay, I'll just go ahead. All I needed to do was mount one switchblade disconnect. So I tried to dig into that pole with the drill bit, and it wasn't happening at all. But then I remembered my grandfather helped us fix a go-kart that had a broken U-bolt holding the axles together. And nobody really wanted to help us, but Grandpa was pretty cool. And so he was like, I can fix this. And so he grabbed a piece of all thread and
that's the way he said it, huh?
Yeah, all thread.
All thread.
And then he bent it into place, and we put the axle back on, and we were riding the go-kart.
Grandpa to the rescue.
Yeah, so Grandpa to the rescue. So at that point, I remembered I've got some uses with all thread.
Yeah.
And so I used the sandwich method, and then I just started saying, hey, there's no really reason to use two pieces of strut when I can bend the 1/4 inch all thread. And so I would bend it like this, kind of eyeball that.
And you want it coming off to where it's basically parallel with each other at that point?
And it does have a little bit of flexibility still. That way, if it doesn't quite fit in the lobes, because those aren't always perfect, but there's still plenty of room. So then we're going to mark it.
Okay.
So we want to mark it to where it's halfway through the Unistrut itself, because we don't want it poking out so you don't cut yourself. And also, too, you want to be able to mount things flush right up against the Unistrut. So we're just going to go ahead and mark this here.
Yeah, so if you cut it too long, people could walk by and scratch themselves, scrape themselves.
Absolutely.
But also, you couldn't mount something over the top of this.
Although we're not going to mount anything over this today, but you could essentially mount some things over that. So you want to make sure that there's room for that for additions later.
How do you cut that?
So I think the safest way to cut this after one would put their safety glasses on is also, I guess, this is my favorite show today. So my favorite way of cutting metal these days is with the bandsaw versus using the sawzall that was so
What would Tim
prevalent
Allen
in.
say?
What would he say?
Ho, ho, ho.
So we're going to take this saw here. I'm going to go ahead and just hang it there. That is a cordless Milwaukee 18 volt. And so we're going to go ahead and mount this. Say if you had this vise on the back of your truck or on site, this is probably the best way to cut something. If not, you could have maybe someone help you hold that. So get that in there pretty tight. I step up on my little box here. You want to make sure that the shoe of this is right on the metal so we don't have a lot of jumping right there. Hold the all thread. Get it started. And then we make our cuts.
When we're cutting that, do we have to worry about messing up the threads or anything like that?
Well, with the bandsaw, you can get right into the groove there. And so generally with the bandsaw, you don't have to worry about it. But I did want to demonstrate there's a few ways that you can deburr some of that metal.
When you say deburr, what do you mean?
So if there was, bad cut, we want to be able to make sure that the bolts can, slide onto there easy enough. You would take a file, multi-file, and just kind of like pretend like you're sharpening a very dull pencil and kind of remove some of those metal shards. So that would be one way. The second way that's pretty prominent is, or another way, maybe not just the second way. So actually take a nut before you make your cut, and you would slide it behind where you were cutting. You make your cut, and then you can then remove that to where it literally kind of does the filing for you, or the deburring with that. So
it's going back through there and making sure that your threads are good because
absolutely.
of the threads on the inside of the washer.
And you might as well go ahead and
the nut.
Do your fitting just to make sure, because let's say you were on a roof or a ways away from the truck or wherever you have your cutting station. You want to make sure that this fits before you start struggling and then realize that you didn't clean off your all thread enough to where a bolt would fit on there.
Now this is what you cut off. Is this just trash?
No, absolutely not. Now this might be a little short, but I've used short pieces like this before when I was working on a ground mount by myself. I mounted this into the top extrusion of the rail sets, mounted 2 of those, set my module up to where it wouldn't fall and slide off the array or on the roof. And you can put this there so it keeps the module from sliding off while you actually get the proper measurements and mounting equipment for the module. So you can at least get one side started and then push the other one into the right spot. So it can hold things into place.
So you're using it as an extra set of hands as well?
Essentially, yes.
Okay. All right, so we've got our U-brackets.
We've got our U-brackets. And so we'll go ahead and I guess get our strut in place. And if you wouldn't mind helping me hold that up. Here's where we go into a few of the accessories that you would want to have. Now we're going to be using a fender washer. And thank you, Kelly, for holding up while I just jabber on. You'll do all the work for me here. So this is going to keep our U-bolt assembly from sliding through these big nuts or these big holes here. And so we want to use a fender washer versus a more conventional style washer would look something like this, maybe a little smaller. And that has a potentiality of pulling through that lobe there. So we're going to go ahead and use what they call a fender washer. We will slide our bolt around. Go. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Kelly.
So I noticed that you had 2 different sizes of, or 3 different sizes of washers.
Actually, yeah. So I'm going to try a different size here. So I can just kind of drop those in.
There's one towards the back. So the fender washers basically have a thicker inside thickness.
That's right. Yeah. So that will be a larger diameter of actual metal there to keep that from sliding through. Okay. So we got this one. Go ahead and get that one started. I might have to.
Yeah. When you start to tighten these down, is there a way to tighten them too tight?
You could tighten it too tight, and then it might actually strip the threaded rod. It could actually even
break it.
So
would there be a certain spec that you would torque it to, like we talk about when we're installing batteries and inverters?
Likely we would probably torque something like this to maybe 50 to 100 pounds on a torque wrench, but I will use a lot of cases. I will get it hand tight with the wrench with one hand, and I'll get that really nice and snug, and then just do a quarter turn. And again, that's another one of those grandfather tricks. It's what we call the spark plug tightening, where you get it snug and then turn it a quarter turn.
And you were telling me that you always have your installers test their installs?
Yes. So I'll have them, at least when they're mounting Unistrut and then conduit pieces, I like to have them do a couple pull-ups on it so we know that is absolutely mounted. And yeah, because you don't want to accidentally forget to tighten up something and then go to inspection. Because I've had a lot of inspectors just walk right up to my work, grab that conduit or that piece of Unistrut and just shake it. And, you know, they're going to do the same sort of test. So I'd have our guys, you know, I like to overbuild, as it were. Particularly, I like to use EMT versus PVC pipe in most places. That way, residential installers can kind of get used to what it might be doing a commercial job, because there's a lot of commercial installers that wouldn't necessarily do like 100 kW job because they're only interested in doing megawatt style job. But so I like to train all of my installers in residential to use EMT and rigid conduit. So if they do get a small commercial job, they won't be they'll be more familiar with the equipment that's needed to use for, you know, industrial stuff. And the first person who ever taught me about Unistrut was a commercial electrician. His name was Bradley. So Brad, if you're listening, I appreciate all of the insight and help that you've given me over the years. Another piece of equipment that's really nice to have around would be a locking nut. And so that's got a nylon piece of a threaded insert there that once you get it on there tight, it's not going to back off. And so that's a good thing to have around as well.
I can see that would be more convenient than thread locker, but do you ever use thread locker?
I've used thread locker before as well.
You put that in here?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. Again, we'll just kind of do the pop and drop.
Pop and drop.
In there. Get those started and see how nicely they just kind of go on because we've deburred the end of the thread. As I say that, I
drop it.
Yeah.
Did you get it?
Yep. We are seated there. And so we'll go ahead and
so now are you going to test this for us today?
I figured one of the younger guys could do a couple pull-ups or some chin-ups on.
I mean, we're the only ones in here.
No, I'd say you're probably in a better.
You're the installer right now.
But just to show you that it can hold a substantial amount of weight, it is, and that's probably not even completely tightened, but you can put a serious amount of weight on top of that without it moving. And so our next thing we're going to use
how the cone nuts work in the Unistrut.
How the cone nuts, go ahead and take these out since we're not doing any sort of drilling or true electrical work. So you take your cone nut. Let's say we want to mount this in this general area. Take our cone nut, put that in, twist it, and then now we can mount this by taking our screw here. Again, too, it's a little easier said than done. Got my gloves on so I can actually feel kind of what I'm doing. And again, if you're working with any sort of wiring, you definitely want to wear your gloves and your safety goggles. But we are not making any cuts right now, so I'll go ahead and.
Yeah, sometimes you got to have gloves, but they make the job harder sometimes.
They really do sometimes.
You want to use this to twist it on? I don't think you're in there.
Okay. I'm going to leave this a little bit of place so we can seat this other cone nut into place. Get that lined up.
I'll go ahead and insert this one to have it ready for you. Pop it in there and twist it. It's right there for the bottom hole.
I'm going to try to allow for the camera to kind of see what I'm doing back here.
So this would be just mounting an IMO disconnect. So it's just using the cone. What do you call these things?
Cone nuts.
Cone nuts.
Although that was the squarish cone nut like this. I think it said on the back they still called that a cone nut. There's also another version of a fastening nut that slides in your, they call it a spring nut. And it's probably my least favorite out of all of them. And there's literally a spring on the other side. So you slide it in the channel and you compress the spring. But in some cases, it just kind of gets a little crazy. So I prefer a cone nut without the spring.
It's interesting to me that we're using the same tool to mount these components as we did to mount our brackets.
That's right.
So we've got the nuts that fit the 1/4 inch all thread here, and we're using the same tool for the bolts that we're using that go into the cone nuts.
And it would also be the same size, which is 7/16, that you would use for most module mounting equipment as well, because even though it might be a T-bolt, they're generally a 1/4-20 with a 7/16 head on them. So
if we could essentially make our own bolt if we needed one, if we were one short, and put maybe a nylon log nut on the end of it, or a washer and a regular nut.
although I would recommend trying to find the manufacturers. I have done a few jobs before where we would take old panels off because we needed to do a re-roofing, and the racking company was no longer in business.
Okay.
And so their specialized bolt wasn't available. And so I would use a piece of all thread because they can come in various lengths, and you can cut it to make it exactly, the right length that you need to. And we were able to, secure that module down while we tried in our best efforts. In some cases, we never found the right piece of hardware because it just didn't exist. But so yeah, in a pinch, you could use all thread to secure a module while you find the right hardware.
Yeah, you got to be careful of warranties and things like that.
Absolutely.
Sometimes, unfortunately, businesses go.
Sometimes they go out of business, or they'll be in business, but they just no longer offer that style. And maybe because when I first started, modules were a 60-watt module was a big module. Now we almost have 600-watt modules.
Oh yeah.
So you can imagine the diameters and the depth of that panel might be a lot different than they are today. So, and so that's how we would mount this. And okay, here's our third cone nut here. And we might need to actually use the different style here so we can slide that one back a little. So my preferred, or at least, in my opinion, these are the most universal style, which is the cone nut. Thank you, Kelly. That way we can just kind of pop that in there, twist it to where it locks into place, and we can still slide that into position because we're not completely tight up there with those. Get that lined up.
And oh, you already have one?
Do you want to have fun?
No, go for it.
Do this one?
Nope, you're all good.
So now that I'm standing this way, I'll take these gloves off, be a little more helpful.
You can switch sides if you need to.
I might do that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kelly.
So these pedestal mounts are good when you don't want to mount something directly against a wall. You showed me a picture of a log cabin where people didn't want their components mounted to mess up the fascia of the log cabin.
And one of the installers had installed, how a log cabin can meet like this. There was a disconnect on this side, and then there was the inverter on this side.
Yeah, so they had some components mounted here and some components mounted here.
And it was just like, I understand that was the closest they needed to be, as close as they could, but in that case, it just really looked sort of ugly. And where a rack or a pedestal mount would have really come in handy. Some cases, and again too, a lot of folks who've done megawatts worth of solar installs might have have not done any ground mounts. And so this works really great for mounting your PV disconnects onto the ground mounts themselves, without having to compromise the integrity of the pole mount or the ground mount, uprights. As well as, in Santa Fe, New Mexico, there's a lot of stucco homes and adobe homes where there's just not a really good way to mount into that and anchor into that. And also there's, it's pretty popular for green building homes to use what they call the structural integrated panel system. So within that wall, you might have a wall section that doesn't have any studs within that wall because it is its own structure within. So there's no real good place to bite into a 2x4 or a stud on the other side because it doesn't exist. So a rack or a pedestal mount would be the perfect scenario for those.
Sure. Now, I know you've talked about sometimes the homeowner just changes their mind. And so, I'm thinking these are these are not necessarily what you would use in a pinch, right? They're always what you have as a resource in your back pocket for plan B, because I know that installers always have a plan. They have a design, they come with their full bill of materials, and they come with, you know, all of their materials on their list. But sometimes things happen.
And sometimes homeowners don't communicate amongst themselves. So maybe the son is like, hey, Dad, I really just don't want to see that equipment mounted over there. Can you guys move that to the back next to the air conditioning pad? And so that would be a good scenario with that. And nowadays we have more and more equipment, inverters and batteries themselves, that are outdoor rated. And so this is a really good way to get everything outside. In some cases, like, you might need to have a disconnect by, you know, maybe 300 feet away from the array, at where the main service comes in at the pole. And so this would be a great thing as well for some of that. For more or less off-grid and rural jobs, you might see more of this than you would, say, you know, in the city with the standard roof mounts and running the conduit all nice and neatly through the attic and stuff like that. It's not always available. So, and sometimes homeowners associations you've got a great design, your homeowner is fine with where you want to put it, and then it's found out, you know, hopefully before the job starts, that the homeowners association does not want anything on this side of the building or whatever it might be. So you might need to move this around. So although I've seen this quite a bit for temporary power drops as well, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a temporary. It can be a temporary or a permanent solution.
Yeah. So you've also talked about, you know, sometimes you can use Unistrut itself to extend or expand Unistrut. Right?
So
what does that mean?
So, and I don't want to spoil it, but this is kind of building up for our next episode, where we're going to start doing a little bit more,
I think that's good,
thorough construction with Unistrut. And there might be some ways that we can expand, make longer, or splice Unistrut. And so sometimes you might have 3 or 4 layers, and it might be hard to find, let's say, like a 9-inch bolt, where you can use some all thread to, you know, make your custom size bolt. So you can now sandwich some pieces together, maybe do some splices, angle pieces. So
you talked about that as far as going around a pipe, or sometimes people have to go around columns or boxes that they just don't want you to drill into. And you talked about kind of going around a box.
Yeah.
Like that. Okay. We do have some questions.
Sure.
It says, how do you install the Unistrut into the ground?
Okay. So the Unistrut is not necessarily, I'm sure you could probably use Unistrut for an upright, but what we've done is we're using 2-inch conduit. You can use 2-inch rigid conduit for the most part, and you put that into the ground with your concrete. Now, we definitely check with your local criteria, but generally, like something like this, it's only going to hold a few 100 pounds, maybe, or even less. You probably want to do like a 24-inch hole in the ground, fill that with concrete, and then you should be well stout. Now, we've done this in 5-gallon buckets, and I could probably tip this over, but I doubt that I could, you know, push this around if it were actually in the ground with that much concrete.
Right.
So
now, you've shown us that when people already have ground mounts, they already have their conduit in the ground, in the concrete, and sometimes you just need to install a few extra components.
Yeah, in a lot of cases where, let's say this is your disconnect here, and it comes up out of the ground, you really need to have that conduit strapped. So you could take I'll just assimilate this. We'll just pretend that this would go the whole span here, but you could mount this and use your pipe clamps. It comes right up out of the ground, and now you will meet code because now you've got your pipe is strapped accordingly.
Okay. So we have another question at Thurman with Hands. Says, Off-Grid Kenny, you are very knowledgeable. Where did you get your experience from?
So I did a concert in the middle of nowhere, and it was off-grid, and that's what started my career early. I worked in Boulder, Colorado. I moved from Texas to Colorado, and was living in a teepee at the time.
Cool.
And had a very small solar panel and a car battery. And I did not have a charge controller, nor did I really know that I needed a charge controller. So one of the band members worked for a solar company in Boulder, and he said, "Hey, you should come and, get some equipment." And while I was there buying some equipment, I didn't know I was talking to the owner. And then he was like, "Oh, so you know how this kind of works?" And I was like, "Yeah, kind of." And so he offered me a job. So I knew at that point I was really wanted to be the solar guy. So.
And that's been how many years ago?
Probably 30 something years ago now. Yeah.
And now you're training installers.
Yes. Which is the most fun. Like I really like, I like getting people excited about having batteries and storage with their solar systems, because that's how we cut our teeth originally, because there was no systems that were grid tied. It was grid tied was actually even illegal. And not to say that we did anything illegal like that, but we did experiment, we'll say. But every system had a battery, had storage. There was no grid tie systems back then. So now I kind of feel like it's kind of come full circle again. And there's a whole new, generation of installers that have done megawatts and megawatts worth of solar, but they've never cabled the battery one. So I want to be there to help them with that transition.
Yeah, and you're doing a great job.
Well, thanks.
So what is the most creative way you have ever used All-Thread?
I would say with, well, actually it wasn't me that used it, but, fixing the go-kart. But I think really with the top of pole mount, like bending that All-Thread around and being able to mount a switch there, because my 18-volt drill was just not going to go through that pole at all. And so I needed a way to mount that PV disconnect. So that was, so I don't really have a lot of crazy stories with All-Thread. Now with Unistrut and the combination of Unistrut and All-Thread, I've built complete racking systems. I've built sheds before with Unistrut, housings that, we would have an inverter that wasn't outdoor rated. So we need to build like sort of an inverter shed, so to speak. I've built that out of Unistrut and All-Thread. So, yeah.
Okay. Have we gone through everything that you wanted to share about All-Thread and Unistrut today? Or was there anything else?
I think so, unless there's any more questions.
All right. Well, we're going to take a few more minutes to give you guys a chance to drop your questions in the chat. If you have anything that you wanted to ask Kenny about anything we went over today. And while we're doing that, Kenny, I want to thank you for being here and sharing all these practical techniques. I think there's stuff that I've learned today that I can implement immediately. So I want to thank you for that. And I'm looking forward to what we're going to do next. But I can really see where you got the nickname Off-Grid Kenny. And I think you've earned a new nickname today.
And what would the pop and drop?
I mean, seeing you bend all this steel, growing up, I only knew one man who could bend steel. But you've shown us today that really all men and women can bend steel. So I think your new nickname today, see what I've done with what you've taught me? I've got Unistrut here. I've made a hanger. Your new nickname, Off-Grid Man of Steel, Kenny.
Oh, thanks, Kelly. And look at that. That is, I was wondering where that extra piece was. So now we know.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Kelly.
Just like me, you guys can implement these tips and tricks immediately in creative ways, even making a hanger to hang your clothes on if you're needing one more hanger. So to everyone watching, if you've got your own ways to use 1/4 inch All-Thread to make your job easier, we want to see it. You can go to our website at signaturesolar.com. Just click on the tab that says Discover More, and there's a link there, Amp Up Solar Workshop. You can fill out the form, share your pictures, give us a little description of what your project is, and you might even be featured on the next episode. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on Facebook at Signature Solar US so you never miss an episode. Hopefully you found something that you could use today, just like I did, and implement it immediately. So thanks for joining us today, There's no more questions, so we'll see you next time right here on Amp Up.